What's good, y'all? BeatGenerals.com back with a brand new tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll be breaking down a Meek Mill type beat that I made recently. The actual beat is slightly slower than Meek Mill's normal stuff, but the thought process behind that was I wanted to kind of bring that ATL sound to it a little bit. So in my opinion, this would work best for like a Meek Mill featuring a Quavo or an ATL type artist kind of sound. All of the sounds in this were provided by StudioSounds.com. As usual, all of my VIP members, make sure you download the kit that includes all the sounds used in this as well as the FLP. Without further talking, let's go ahead and jump to the beat. So the very first sound that I'm going to be using is called the KB synth organ, and this is from OVO The Dynasty Volume 2, and this is in silent. So I have my BPM set to 135. Usually I would have my BPM set to 160 to 180-ish for Meek Mill type tracks, but I wanted to bring more of an ATL type feel to this, so I slowed it down a little bit. And then the pattern that I kind of used in here, I purposely tried to make this pattern a little bit more busy. That would create the illusion of a much faster track, so even though it was slower, it would still sound like it was a little bit quicker, which would help with that Meek Mill type sound. Anyway, so the pattern that I started off with was basically a D sharp like this, and then I took that down to a A sharp, back up to the D sharp, up to a B, back down to the D sharp, up to a A sharp, D sharp, F sharp. So it's basically just this. Has a little bit more of a menacing type tone to it, which sounds really good to me. So let's go ahead and hold Control, hold Shift, and go ahead and drag this over, and then do the same thing again. So we end up with something like this. So now instead of just kind of leaving it like this, I wanted to kind of add a little bit of a top end melody to it. So what I started off with, and actually let's go ahead and just move this down one more octave, Control down arrow to move it down. But anyway, what I started off with was just a F sharp. So I just did these kind of smaller, sharp, faster type notes. Went down to the D sharp, back up to a G sharp, F sharp, A sharp. So we end up with something like this. And let's go ahead and grab this, Shift, and just drag it over. So this is the very first melody pattern that I started off with. So it has a cool type vibe, sounds a little bit quicker than it actually is, but still has that Meek Mill menacing minor type vibe. So one thing I'm going to do before we actually move on is go ahead and assign a free mixer track to this, which is effects channel 1. And I actually have my mixer detached. So effects channel 1, and I'm going to go ahead and just put a parametric EQ and just cut basically the frequencies I don't need, which is going to be a lot more of that little low end and a little bit of the mids. We kind of just want that top end from it. Something like that. So let's go ahead and jump to the next section, continue. So the next patch I have loaded up is 123, the triangle pad from OVO The Dynasty Volume 2 as well. And basically the only thing we want to do to this is go ahead and turn on this mono legato feature over here. And we're going to go ahead and just take a D sharp note. We're going to go ahead and just extend it out like this. And then we're going to basically just pick a couple notes from our initial melody that we did with the organ, just kind of make them stand out. So the ones that I kind of wanted to accent a little bit were a little bit, or a couple of these top notes basically. So I have it sliding up to the G sharp, and then over here we're going to have it sliding up to the A sharp, followed by the F sharp, and it just repeats. So we can go ahead and just select that and drag it over. So right now by itself, this is what it sounds like. And we combine that with the organ, this is what we have. All right, and now just to switch it up a little bit, we have it set to effects channel 2. We're going to go ahead and add a gross beat to this and make sure this isn't detached just so it'll move out of the way. But basically with this gross beat, we're just going to use the Transgate 3, I believe is what I used. Then the next thing I added to it was a heavy kind of reverb set to about 3 seconds. Set this to around 60 and this to around 80-ish. Just to help soften the sound up a little bit. Add a quick little delay on it just to give it some movement. 3 steps, and then we're going to go ahead and put a parametric EQ on here and just cut any frequencies we don't need. So let's go ahead and let it play. Alright, so that just kind of helps accent my little organ and just adds kind of a creepy little element to it and just something new to layer on top of it. So let's jump in the next section, continue. So the next thing I wanted in here is I wanted some kind of hit or just some a little bit sharper right here on the one, just kind of help fill it in a little bit. So what I used was the Pluck Ancestral Roots, and this is from OVO The Dynasty Volume 2 as well. And basically all I did was just lay in a quick little kind of hit like this. And then I almost built like my own delay. Some of you guys have seen me do this before, but I'll just kind of fade it out like this, just because it gives me a little bit more control than the standard delay and having to play with the volume and whatnot. But let's go ahead and just take a listen to it. So I'm not sure if you guys picked that up, but it's very subtle. Alright, so just a very simple little sound, but I feel like it just adds an interesting kind of element to the track and just sounds pretty good in there. So let's jump in the next section, continue. So the next thing I added in here was just this atmospheric pad. It's called the Eerie Atmosphere Patch 6 from OVO The Dynasty Volume 2. And basically the reason I added this was just because I felt like it would add a little bit of drama to the track. Atmospheric pads just help kind of with that. And then just to also build a little bit of tension and just kind of add a cool little element to it. So all I did with it basically was just play one note, just the D sharp like this, and here it is without it. And then on the second go around I'll go ahead and play it with it. And before we actually even play anything with it, let's go ahead and on the free mixer track, let's go ahead and just put an EQ on it real quick. We only want the top end from it basically, so we're gonna do that, and then just trim a little bit of the highs just so it's not quite as bright to kind of keep with that trap type feel. So let's go ahead and play it. So to me, that almost gives it a horror movie type feel, which is perfect for just a trap track in general. So I like that. Let's go ahead and jump in the next section, continue. So basically, once we have pattern 1 completed, just go over here to your little pattern section, quick render as audio clip or render as audio clip. Either way, you'll get the same thing. A quick little render basically of just pattern 1 exactly as it sounds. So next thing I'm going to do is go down to pattern 2, and I have SliceX loaded up. What I'm going to do is just drag this pattern into SliceX. From here, SliceX is going to automatically go ahead and chop this sample, but I want to go ahead and chop it the way that I'd like to. So the first thing I usually do is just go over here and I'll right click and then click dull auto slicing. That'll just give me a little bit less of these little markers to remove. And what I did for you guys is I went ahead and I wrote down all the marker times so that we can actually make sure that everything lines up. This is going to be a little bit important. And basically and actually, let me just cover this real quick. To use these time markers, once you basically hover over a marker, you'll see the time up here. Now, if your timing is different than this, what you want to do is go down here to the view, come down here to the time format and click the bar beat and tick tab. That'll allow you to see the same timing that I'm seeing. So let's go ahead and adjust these times real quick. So the first one is 0101. Basically got that. Marker 2 is 01047. So let's go ahead. So it has to come over here a little bit. 47, right about there. Marker 3 is going to be 0495. Nine five, right around there, and try to get as close as I can to that. And then we have marker 4, which is going to be 020247. right around there. And then marker 5 finally, which is going to be 020295. Should be right around here. So we can probably go slightly closer to this. Somewhere around there. Should be right around cool. And actually that's about what it is, 9.5. And then from here, basically what I'm going to do is just go ahead and drag down the pitch regions. The pitch regions will just go ahead and move the whole thing a couple octaves down. And what that allows me to do is just keep the same notes, but have a different lower pitch to it. Excuse me. And from here, what I'm going to do is just lay in this simple little pattern of 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to skip the 4 and just go up to 5, and then hit Control and B 4 times. So this is the main little pattern that you actually hear in the track. So this has a cool little bounce to it. It was a little bit different from the standard synth type stuff and was just unique and creative in my opinion. It was kind of fun to work with. So let's jump in the next section. I'll show you guys what I layered on top of this. The next thing I did was just right click and clone on the Slice X to get a second copy of it. From here it's chopped exactly the same as this one is. So from here we can just stack. We don't have to chop it again. Now keep in mind we moved this one all the way down. Now just to add a little bit of variety, a cool interesting touch to it, instead of keeping this one lower, I'm going to reset it to the original pitch, and I can layer this confidently because I know this is directly just a couple octaves down. It's not changing notes or anything like that. So now I can actually use it to kind of stack and layer. So the patterns that I guess chops that I decided to layer were pattern 2, pattern 5, basically just like this. So every now and then they come in. Something along the lines of that. So for this first one, what I did was I assigned a free mixer track. I cut a good amount of that bottom end. This is going to be a southern track like I've told you guys before. And with that southern track, that bass is really important. So we carve out a nice space for that bottom end. And then I also wanted a slightly sharper tone from it. So what I did was I boosted slightly around the 1500 mark just to make it slightly more sharp in that little decibel region. And then for the second one, I signed a free mixer track, dropped a parametric EQ on it as well, cut the bottom end. And then I threw a delay on this one. I want the second one to be a little bit more of an accent piece, have a little bit more of movement than the second one, than the first one, just for a little bit of variety and to make that little stack a little bit more interesting. So I just added a fruity delay, panning as usual to left or right, doesn't matter, turn the volume down. And I set this to the default 4 steps, I believe. Well, actually, I think the default is 3 steps and I set it to 4 steps. So let's go ahead and take a listen to it real quick and adjust as needed. So that had a nice bounce to it, was a nice foundation to build on. You could actually already kind of start dropping drums and thinking of different patterns on top of this. At least I could personally. So it was just nice and inspiring and fresh to me. So let's go ahead and jump in the next section, continue. So from this point on, I actually kind of somewhat started laying out the beat. So what I started off with was pattern 1. Or actually not pattern 1, pattern 2, which is this little pattern that we just built. So I kind of had it come in like this initially. So right here is where the drums would drop. So this is technically a little intro section. So this first little section is cool. It sounds pretty interesting, but I wanted to go ahead and build a little second section to kind of build somewhat. So the cool thing about sampling yourselves and doing this kind of thing is that everything that I'm working with here is basically playing the same note somewhat, and it's in key. So you can use it to stack things differently and just combine different things that you usually wouldn't put together. So for example, right here, what I did was, instead of basically leaving this part out, I repurposed it a couple times, once in the intro and then for the hook sections as well. So let's go ahead and take a listen to this, and I'll show you guys how this kind of builds a drama a little bit. All right, so obviously that still somewhat fits, but this little top section is a little bit too busy. So what I did was I went to the next empty pattern, which was pattern 3, and just copied this exact same thing down from pattern 1. And I just got rid of this little top end section, so I only had this for the intro. All right, and then over here, like I told you guys, the drums would drop. So I wanted some kind of little transition effect or something right here. So what I decided to use was basically a little tape stop. Now, we usually use the D-Blue tape stop, or you can go ahead and use the Grow Speed plugin as well. That works. But one plugin that I like to use is the Glitch plugin. So Glitch is made by D-Blue, the same company that makes the tape stop plugin. And a ton of people will always ask, well, how do I do like the tape stop and start type thing? They know how to do the tape stop, but they don't really know how to do the tape start. And you can actually do that right in here in Glitch. You want to just go down to your tape stop effect, and you have a slow down feature, and then you have a speed up feature. The speed up feature is what's going to give you that restart that people are looking for. So you can adjust how sensitive you want it to be. For this particular track, I picked 10% for the speed up and 25% for the slow down. And then all I did was just put in one note like this at the end. Now let's go ahead and take a listen to what this sounds like real quick. All right, so you guys saw the little tape stop and then start again. So I want to go ahead and automate this. This is going to come in over here, not during this part. So what I did right there is just right click the little mix level wheel, create automation clip, which pops this up. Now from here, I can go ahead and adjust where we can actually hear that plugin come in and where we don't hear it. So anywhere I make a little bar like this, we're going to go ahead and hear that tape stop. And you can also adjust these bars for length, and what that'll allow you to do is you can actually just isolate the tape start with smaller little notes like this, or you can get the full effect by having it like this. So it's just kind of up to you and what your taste is as far as the tape stop goes. But here's what it sounds like real quick. All right, so you guys see that was a little bit quicker than I wanted it to. Let's go ahead and play it again. So now if I want the actual full tape stop to play, I want to go ahead and expand this and make it a little bit longer. Kind of like that. So let's go ahead and jump to the next section, continue. So the next thing I wanted to work on is on pattern 4, and it's going to be the start of the drums. So I'm only going to go ahead and program the hats and the claps and snares in this real quick. There's a couple of different patterns for drums, or actually I believe there's 2 different patterns. You guys don't quote me yet, but they kind of switch back and forth through the track through different drum patterns, just kind of keep the energy and keep it exciting. So on pattern 4, we're going to build pattern 1, and pattern 1 is going to start off like this: fill each 2 steps, normalize out all the way to the right, send us to the piano roll, Alt and Q, and we're going to go ahead and I believe it was the MPC 1 setting on this, which is going to give us this kind of shuffle between higher velocity notes and lower velocity notes, which helps kind of create a bounce for the track. So we're going to go ahead and accept that. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and assign a free mixer track for SD rubber, which is just our snare, and clap wheels, which is just our clap for this. And what we're going to do for both of these is go ahead and assign a Maximus, and I'm going to use my typical setting that I usually use, the warmness, no latency setting. on both of them. And I think that just gives the snares a nice pop and makes them slightly more aggressive and cut through the mix a little bit better. And then from here, this is actually pretty simple. It's going to be a pattern like this. So this is the first, or actually just the beginning of the first drum pattern. All right, and that doesn't really sound all that great. So what we want to do is we're going to come in here to the normalized trim, go ahead and shorten that up. And then for the clap, we want to do the same thing. We want that kind of short murder beat style clap. So go ahead and just take that all the way to the right. So now we have this. All right, so that's kind of the beginning. Let's jump into the next section and add the other elements to it. So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and add this little rim shot to the track. This is from the Legends Never Die kit, but it's a simple 808 rim shot, nothing really too special. But I'm going to just use this as a little percussive element. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in these two little bars right here, and then these two over here. Send it to the piano roll. The first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and quantize it. I'm not going to actually let the velocities, or actually, yeah, I am going to go ahead and turn the velocities all the way up. That's fine as well for this. And for this first one, I'm going to go ahead and even them out. And then for the second one, I'll go ahead and let it kind of switch back and forth. So we can actually turn it up slightly like that. Now for this little second section, I want to go ahead and raise this. So I'm going to go ahead and just go up 1 octave. So when we combine everything with these two little perks, which are super simple, as you guys just saw, this is what it sounds like. So super small little percussion sound, but helps with that bounce and just add a nice little interesting element to it. So let's go ahead and jump in the next section and start working on our kicks. So next thing I'm going to do is add this little punchy kick. This kick is going to be playing back and forth kind of off of the 808. They're going to kind of get the energy from each other. So I want to keep this slightly more open than I usually would, just to be able to kind of have that difference between pieces where the 808 hits by itself and then pieces where it hits together with the punchy kick. So for this punchy kick pattern, what we're going to start off with is super simple. It's going to be like this. Then add this. And this is basically it for the first pattern. Then we're going to go in here, Alt and Q, go ahead and quantize it. I'm not going to use the velocity settings just because for like a southern track like this, I don't really want a ton of variation in the kicks and kind of little ghost kicks and stuff like that. That's more popular in backpack type music. You could obviously use that if that's your style or if you want to try that out. But for my particular track, I want them all kind of even. So I'm going to just go ahead and turn the velocity tab down, go ahead and accept this. So now this is the kick pattern that I have. I'll just go ahead and turn that down slightly for you guys so it's not clipping, but let's go ahead and just take a listen to that kick one more time. So that's cool for the first little kick pattern. Let's jump into the next section. I'll show you guys the second drum pattern that's used throughout the track and how that differs from this one. So next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to copy this whole pattern just so I can take it and switch it up. So what I'm going to do is just double click into any of these little spaces right here, hold Control and C to copy. Go down to pattern 5, Control and V to paste. So now I have the exact same pattern down here as well. So the way we're going to change it up is we're going to slightly alter the pattern, add an open hat and add a second hat in here as well. And I just have this trimmed and normalized. And basically the first thing we're going to do is go in here, select 1/6 of a beat, select this kind of lower velocity note, click it just so we can start working with that. And then we can just draw in like a 6th roll right here. Then we're going to go over here as well, and we're going to do the same thing over here. Keep moving. And then for this fourth one, instead of having it come out from here, it's going to basically just move a step in and kind of lead up to this. So this is the second little hat pattern that plays. All right, and then what we're gonna do with our hat, just to make them slightly lighter, let's go into the piano roll, hit shift and hit our up arrow. Just move it up to the D sharp, and let's do the same thing on pattern 4 as well. So next thing I'm gonna do is add this little open hi-hat, which just comes in right here. And then over here as well. And then this little second hat, which is kind of used as a little texture type sound in there. It's something you'll notice, but it's not going to play a huge effect in this track at all. So let's go into the piano roll as well and go ahead and quantize these, Alt and Q. Do the same thing for this, Alt and Q. And then let's go ahead and just copy this over. And even though this isn't going to be the official kind of sequencing of the track, I want to show you guys how it changes the mood slightly going into that busier drum track. So here's pattern 4, and then we'll get into pattern 5 over here. All right, so it's just a slight little change, but it starts kind of getting the track a little bit more hype, a little bit more going on, and starts building suspense, which will later kind of take that suspense and use it to really build up to the hook. So let's jump into the next section, continue. So next thing I want to do is I want to start laying out my 808 pattern. So for this particular 808, I'm going to be using B8 kick sub 3. Which is for Silent 2 for Muddy Cups 2. And basically I'm going to have two different 808 patterns in here. One that's slightly more calm, and then one that has a little bit more going on, just to help with that kind of busyness feeling that I was kind of telling you guys about, with this being slightly more calm and a little bit more relaxed, and this kind of starting to build pace and starting to build tension and energy for the hook. So I want my 808 to reflect that as well. So I'm going to have two different 808s. The first one is super simple. It's literally just going to be, actually just go in here real quick and we can do it this way. But basically we're going to start off with the D sharp, which is just the root note. We're going to do something like this. We're going to go ahead and move this down one octave and turn it all the way up. So we have this. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this. So Control C to select it, and then just hit Control V to go ahead and paste it. But anyway, so this is what we have, Alt and Q, quantize. And then let's go ahead and grab this and go down to our next pattern, pattern 7, Control V to go ahead and paste it. And let's go into the piano roll. So before we actually get into this, there's a ton of different ways to switch up 808s. You can switch up paces, you can switch up timing, you can switch up patterns, you can switch up notes. A lot of times we have the tendency to start with our root note, like I did in this particular track, D sharp. But keep in mind, when you're listening to 808 Mafia stuff, Metro stuff, the 808 will actually move a good amount, and a lot of times it won't be the root note. And the cool thing about that is, or I guess just not using the root note, using other notes, is that you can even use the 808 to build tension, because it's not going to give you that perfect kind of bottom end harmony that using the root note would. So keep that in mind as well. But for this particular track, we're going to utilize the root note, but we're going to switch up the pattern and then switch up the pitches slightly as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and shorten this up to have it basically hit twice. Then over here, I'm going to put in a F sharp, which is going to be slightly longer, kind of like this. And then that same F sharp is going to move up here to an F sharp as well. And then we're going to go ahead, Control, and then hold Shift to go ahead and just drag it over. And then for this particular one, we're not going to go ahead and connect them, which will make them slide. What we're going to do instead is leave this a little bit open. So this will start from the beginning and be a little bit more aggressive. So this is what this pattern sounds like. Okay, so something like that. Now let's go ahead and assign a free mixer track for this as well. And I'm going to just cut a little bit of that top end just so it doesn't sound quite as sawy kind of as it does right now. Like that should be cool. And then also cut slightly on the bottom end as well, just to get rid of the muddiness a little bit. Just playing a little bit lower. But let's go ahead and just throw these in here, and I'll show you guys kind of just the difference and what I'm talking about slightly with how it raises the energy. So this is pattern 6, which corresponds to pattern 4, and then we have pattern 7. So this pattern combined with that hi-hat and the other elements along with this 808, I feel like it just starts adding a little bit more of energy and a little bit more suspense to the track. So just a cool place for a rapper to kind of start switching up their flow and to also help with the energy of the track and make sure it's not getting too repetitive. So let's go ahead and jump in the next section, continue. So the next thing I wanted to add in this was the BA Angry Stomper from Muddy Cups Volume 2 as well. And basically what I want from this is I kind of almost want the presence of kind of like a 808 or almost kind of like a stomp. I want that harshness that Southern 808 is kind of known for, but I want to be able to kind of take it in and out just because I thought that would be kind of unique and creative to do. So that's what I did in my track. So basically what I have for this is I have it on track 12. I'm going to go ahead and throw a parametric EQ on here. Again, I only want to keep the top end of this, so let's go ahead and take a listen to it. So all this stuff down here that's going to go ahead and interfere with my initial bass line, I want to get rid of. The only thing I want to keep in, like I said, is just kind of that top end distortion, kind of basically like that. And then the pattern that I put in here is just a D sharp, like this, almost kind of like the Don't Like Stomp, if you guys remember, but just a kind of different, unique twist on that. So I have this coming in over here on pattern 8, and you guys will hear in a second kind of how it switches up from this section to this and how it starts to get a little bit more energetic and a little bit more tense over here. So let's go ahead and take a listen to it. All right, so you really don't even have to change up that 808 over there. We can actually just keep 6 and just do the slightly faster or I guess slightly more busy drum track. So it kind of sounds like this. All right, so that just sounds a lot more fuller and sounds like it's kind of building up to something. I hope you guys can hear that. Without further talking, let's go ahead and jump into the next section, continue. So the next thing I'm going to do is I have silence loaded up, and I'm going to just add these quick 2 little transition effects to start moving it towards the hook section. So I have pattern 9 loaded up, and I have these 2 effects loaded up like I said. So the first one is just this, and the second one is this. So for the first sound effect, basically what we're going to do is we're going to move up to the D sharp, and we're going to lay out a pattern like this. Okay, and then for this one, we're going to use the D sharp 2, but we're going to use an octave lower. And just turn both of these down slightly. And then what I have on both of these is I have them on effects channel 13, and I have a pancake VST loaded up in here just so you guys don't have to wait for me to search for it. But basically I just have it on stock setting, 2 bars. just so it automatically pans and gives it a slightly more interesting feel than your typical transition effects. So when it gets to those actual sounds, here's what it sounds like. So a nice quick little build up lets the user know something new is coming and the beat is about to change up. So let's jump in the next section and start working on our hook. So the next thing I wanted to add in here was from Massive from Hendrix World, and it's just this little drum loop. So it's supposed to be 88 BPM, so technically we have a double time, but it just helped kind of build a little suspense and a little bit of tension in there in the A part of the hook. So I added it in there and basically just had it kind of sound like this. We'll probably have to go ahead and EQ and trim that a little bit, but let's go ahead and start adding the hook sections. Alright, so as you guys can tell, it starts off in this kind of a little bit slightly calmer A section for the hook. So rappers love to do a little chants, or kind of, especially lately, it kind of seems super popular to do an A section of the hook that's slightly more downbeat, and then going into the more hype kind of section. Think Migos, think Gucci, think a lot of different people that have kind of that more calm A section. Even Drake actually does this. So a lot of people do it. You have the more calm A section, then you go up to the more busy B section. So this right here is the A section. It's calmer than this little B section of the verse, which is supposed to be slightly more hype and slightly more energetic. So it's a nice contrast between the two. And then we have this little transition effect to start moving us into the second part of the hook. So let's go ahead and just basically do this real quick. And then over here, let's go ahead and add our second 808 pattern. And the slightly more upbeat drums. So I personally thought that sounded pretty good, but it was still kind of too empty. So I started searching for different stuff, different bells, different plucks, different things like that to try to fill it in. And everything I kind of added in there didn't really sound that great to me until I just tried. Actually, it was kind of an accident. I accidentally left pattern 1 in here with this low part. And what we want to do quickly to this low part is, if you guys remember, we took silent number 2 down here. So it's going to be playing, is this it right here? Where is it at? Actually pattern 3, so it's right here. But basically we have that playing, so we don't want it playing twice. So let's go ahead and just get rid of it over here. So when you add that second little section, this is what it sounds like. So in my opinion, that fit in there very well. Added a nice little transition to the second piece. Actually, not even a transition, just a nice energy to the B section of the hook to allow the artist to really expand what they were doing. So I thought that sounded really good. Let's jump into the next section and continue work on this. So the next thing I wanted to do was add this little LD triangle glider again from Muddy Cups 2. And basically what I'm trying to do with this little section is drop like a little breakdown in here again before it actually goes into the hook. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and basically move this over and create one more little section right here, extend this verse out slightly more than the last one was. And actually, let's go ahead and copy that again. I forgot that I sliced them right there at the beginning. So let me just take a listen to that real quick and show you guys where it's gonna go. So right here is basically where I would like it to drop. So let's go ahead and move this back one further and go ahead and actually just copy this pattern over one more time. So right here is where I'm going to go ahead and add the new pattern, which is going to be pattern 12, I believe. And we're going to go ahead and just lay in this little simple pattern with this lead. Now, when we're doing trap beats, we don't want stuff to be too pretty, too melodic. Sometimes creating those little sour notes and little sour type moments is what brings that dramatic and that horror-ish type feel to trap beats. So using notes that might necessarily, as weird as it kind of sounds, might necessarily not sound as good to you or as melodic is going to be actually fine for most trap beats. So just keep that in mind. So basically what we're going to start off with is just an A sharp. I'm going to go ahead and extend that out, move that down to the G sharp, move that up to the B, bring it down to the A sharp. And we can go ahead and just copy this over. So we end up with something like this before we EQ or anything else. So I thought that sounded cool, had a spooky little vibe to it. Make sure this is on effects channel 16. So let's go ahead and add a parametric EQ to this. We want to just get rid of a lot of the body. We don't want this taking over the track. Just because the track already has a good amount going on, I don't want something coming in there and kind of disrupting the flow of it. It just needs to be a little accent piece that comes in. So let me go ahead and play this and I'll EQ it as needed. And then the less important a sound usually is to me, the further I'll do the panning in the mix later. So this is not even to say that the sound isn't super important or anything like that. It does add a nice touch to the track, but it's not going to be a main focal point. So panning it further, turning it down is going to be perfectly fine. But let's go ahead and take a listen to this real quick. So I thought that was cool, but it still needed something kind of more dramatic to bring that little lead in. So what I decided to kind of do was take basically a page out of Mike Will's book and just add a quick little low pass filter to this little section. So when I'm doing low pass filters, I'll just go ahead and let it play and adjust it to basically fit the track, because everyone's going to be slightly different. Or something like that. Go ahead, create an automation clip for that, turn it down in the parts we don't need it, and then make the little notch right here where we are going to bring it in. So I'm only going to have it play the little low pass filter for the first little section, and then it's going to go ahead and change up. And I'm putting like a little dip in here just to be able to control how it sounds, so it gives it kind of almost that little changing building effect that Mike Will uses. So it's almost kind of like an automation, if you will. All right, so I think that sounds good, but what I want to do there as well is I want to drop a pattern in here that has basically everything playing except the hi-hat and the snares. So maybe do something like this. just to again build a little bit of suspense in that section. And then when that little second section comes in with the full drums, it's going to be able to kind of pick up energy again. So just kind of playing with the energy of the track basically. And maybe add like a little tape stop right here before the other hook. Just kind of incorporate that back into there as well. And I might even shorten that tape stop up in the D blue glitch. I'll take a listen to it in a second. And I might even go ahead and edit that D blue glitch slightly, make it maybe just slightly shorter. Just take a listen to what that sounds like. Yeah, I actually prefer that. And other than the mix, this is pretty much the full beat. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoy the sounds and learned something new. Until next time, beatgenerals.com.